Hello, my name is Diana, Andrea's my name, and today I wanted to talk about the evolution. We've all heard about the theory of evolution through natural selection, which was independently described by Charles Darwin and Alfred Russel Wallace. This evolutionary theory is quite simple. New variation arises through random genetic mutation, then inheritance occurs through DNA, and natural selection is the sole cause of adaptation. So only by natural selection organisms become well suited to their environments. But perhaps this is not the only reason why organisms can evolve the way they do. To start with, standard evolutionary theory treats environment as almost like a noise or background condition which can possibly trigger or modify selection, but it's not itself part of the evolutionary process. And that's when debate started between scientists, as a lot of them thinks that environmental influence is a plausible first step in adaptive evolution. So not a long time ago, many scientists have found a need to extend this evolutionary theory in order to complete this gene-centric view. Although changes in the hereditary material are required for adaptation, non-genetic processes can also play a part in how organisms evolve. So there's this alternative vision of evolution that has begun to crystallize, in which processes by which organisms grow and develop are recognized as a cause of evolution. So it's not only genetic inheritance and processes that can change gene frequencies. The extended evolutionary theory tells us that every organism is not just programmed to develop by genes, but that they're constructed in the environment and in the development. Living things do not evolve to fit into the pre-existing environmental conditions, but they co-construct and co-evolve with them. Thus, extended evolutionary theory shows us that this gene-centered view fails to capture the full picture of the processes that direct evolution. Missing pieces include developmental bias, or how physical development influences the generation of variations. For example, one kind of developmental bias occurs when organisms respond to environment by changing their form. This phenomenon is called phenotypic plasticity. For example, leaf shape changes with soil, water, and chemistry conditions, and also leaf insects and praying mantises, they are brown when they hatch during the dry season, and they're green when they hatch during the wet season. So this plasticity not only allows organisms to cope with the new environmental conditions, but also to generate traits that are well suited to them. If selection preserves genetic variants that respond effectively when conditions change, then adaptation largely occurs by accumulation of those genetic variations that stabilize a trait after its first appearance. So, in other words, it's often a trait that comes first, and genes that cement it sometimes follow several generations later. Another missing piece of evolutionary theory is this phenotypic plasticity, or how environment directly shapes organisms' traits. There's also a niche construction phenomenon, or how organisms modify their environment. For example, birds and termites constructing nests, and also beavers making dams. There is also extragenetic or inclusive inheritance, or how organisms transmit more than genes across generations. Those epigenetic changes in the DNA contribute to the transgenerational transmission of the phenotypic variation. And those changes are usually mediated by the changes in the environment. Extended evolutionary theory also includes kin selection, or a strategy that favors reproductive success of organisms' relatives even at their own cost of survival and reproduction. And the well-known example of this, it's the example of social bees. There's also a multi-level selection, or a mechanism when natural selection acts at the level of the group. So groups that cooperate better might survive and reproduce more. For example, groups of social insects and primates. Extended evolutionary theory also includes the phenomenon of evolvability, or the capacity of an organism to generate phenotypic variation, which will be inheritable and thus reduce lethal or non-beneficial mutations. So it means that organisms have complex mechanisms that allow them to evolve and more frequently generate viable variations than those random mutations that are posed to the natural selection. So to conclude, for standard or modern evolutionary theory, all those phenomena are just outcomes of the evolution, but for the extended evolutionary theory, there are also causes. And now there are also some new fields such as epigenetics and evolutionary developmental biology, or EVO-DEVO, that try to demonstrate that development is a direct cause of why and how speciation and adaptation occur, and also of the rates and patterns of the evolutionary chains. So perhaps those random variations that went through natural selection weren't that random at all. And what do you think about the extended evolutionary theory? Does evolution need a rethink?